The whole council was on its feet, and the king had not said one word. I stood at the centre of a chamber full of the most powerful wolves in the north, in my flour-dusted apron, and none of them were looking at me. They were looking at the small hand gripping mine, the king's son, 3 years old, his fingers wound so tightly through my fingers that his knuckles had gone white. Refusing, with the whole force of a pup's stubborn certainty, to let go. And I understood, standing there, that if I opened my hand they would take him. That the moment I stopped holding on was the moment they had been waiting for. That a woman who was nothing, who had walked into this world 11 days ago with a basket of bread, was somehow the only thing standing between this child and the people who wanted to raise him into a weapon. I did not let go. But that is the middle of it, and a woman who tells you the middle before she has earned it deserves to be turned off. Let me go back to an ordinary market morning, with a loaf of bread and a child I had never seen before in my life. I sold bread. That was the whole of me, as far as the world was concerned, and I had made my peace with the world about it years ago. I was 25, an omega with no pack and no name that opened any doors, and I baked before dawn, and sold in the market square of the lower town, and went home to a single room that smelled, at least, of something good. It is not a large life, but it is mine, and I built it with my own 2 hands out of the raw fact of having nothing, and I have known women with far more who could not say the same. The market was the best hour of my day. The noise, the haggling, the smell of everyone's small commerce all at once, fish and wool and green herbs and my own warm bread. I liked being furniture there. I liked being the woman at the bread stall whom everyone saw and no one noticed, because a person no one notices gets to notice everyone else, and I have always preferred watching to being watched. I was counting coppers into a fishwife's palm when a small hand closed around 2 fingers of my other one. I looked down. A little boy stood at my hip, 3 perhaps, dark-haired, dressed far too finely for the lower market, with the round grave face of a child who has wandered somewhere he was not meant to be and has not yet decided whether to be frightened about it. He was looking up at me with an expression of such total, uncomplicated recognition that for one absurd second I looked behind me to see who he had actually found. There was no one behind me. He was looking at me. And before I could ask him whose he was, or where his people were, or any of the sensible things you ask a lost child, he tightened his grip on my fingers, and he smiled the way only very small children smile, with his whole self, and he said one word. Mama. The market went silent. Not slowly. All at once, the way a room goes silent when something has happened that everyone understands before they have words for it. The fishwife's hand froze over her coppers. The wool seller 2 stalls down stopped mid-sentence. Because in a wolf town, a pup's word carries a weight a human child's never could. A pup's wolf knows blood and bond before the pup can speak, and a pup does not say mama to a stranger. A pup cannot say mama to a stranger, and yet this one had, with the flat certainty of a child, telling you the sky is up. Sweetheart, I said, crouching down, gentle as I could with my heart, doing something strange in my chest. I think you've lost your mother in the crowd. I'm not her. But I'll help you find Mama, he said again, patient. The way you repeat yourself to a slow adult. And he climbed into my lap as though it were the most obvious place in the world for him to be, and put his face against my shoulder, and sighed the enormous sigh of a small creature that has finally, after a long search, come home. That was when the guards arrived. They came through the market at a dead run, a wall of the king's own men in iron and grey. Their faces gone the particular white of men who have lost the one thing in the kingdom they cannot afford to lose. They saw the child in my lap, and they stopped as though they had hit a wall, and the biggest of them, I would learn his name, was Edric, the king's second, looked at the pup, and looked at me, and looked at the pup's hand fisted in my apron. And I watched a hardened warrior have no idea what to do. "That is the prince," Edric said. His voice came out wrong. "That is Bram. The king's son. He swallowed. Whose lap is he in? I don't know, I said honestly. He found me. He won't say his mother's name, he keeps saying. Do not, Edric said. Very fast. Say the word, he said. Not here. Not in front of them. His eyes went to the crowd, which had begun, quietly, to press closer. The king's son does not have a mother. The Luna is 2 years dead. Whatever he called you, Mama, Bram said helpfully, to Edric, and half the market made a sound like a held breath let go. I understood, kneeling in the market square with a dead Luna's son in my arms and a ring of the king's guard around me, that I had opened a door I had not known was there, and that I was not going to be allowed to simply close it and go back to selling bread. They did not arrest me. I half expected it. Instead, Edric crouched down to Bram's level, coaxing, careful, and tried to lift him from my lap, and the pup, who had been gentle as a lamb, came apart. He screamed, he clung. His small wolf, too young to shift, flared under his skin in a way I felt more than saw. A wave of animal grief and terror so raw that every wolf in the market flinched from it, and Bram wound his fingers through mine and would not, could not, be moved. So they did the only thing they could. They brought me to. They brought me to the fortress on the hill in a fine-covered cart that smelled of a life I had never lived, with the prince asleep against my side and his hand still in mine. And I looked out at the grey walls coming up and thought, with the gallows humour that has gotten me through most of my life, that this was a great deal of trouble to go to over a loaf of bread I never even got to sell. The Alpha King was waiting in the yard. I knew him before anyone named him. You would. Magnus of the Iron Territories stood at the top of the steps with the stillness of a man holding himself very carefully upright, and even from the cart I could see that he was beautiful, in the way a cliff is beautiful, grand and cold, and clearly the site of some old disaster, the strongest wolf alive. And when the cart stopped and he saw his son asleep against a strange Omega's shoulder, I watched something cross his face that was not relief, or not only relief. It was fear, naked and quickly hidden, and aimed, impossibly, at me. Bram woke, saw his father, and did a curious thing. He smiled at the king, he loved his father, that was plain, but he did not let go of my hand to go to him. He held on to both of us at once, a small bridge between a grieving king and a bread seller, as though he had decided we belonged on the same side of something and was simply waiting for us to catch up. Your Grace, I said, because someone had to speak, and it was not going to be the king, who was staring at his son's hand in mine like a man looking at a wound. I don't know what's happening. I was selling bread. He found me. I've tried to give him back 3 times, and he won't. I heard my own voice waver and steadied it. I'm no one. I want you to understand that before this goes any further. Whatever your son thinks he knows, he's mistaken. I'm just the woman who was standing there. The king looked at me for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and worn, a step worn down by too many feet. My son's wolf, he said, has never once been wrong. And then he turned and walked inside and left me standing in his yard holding his child, because he could not, I would come to understand, make himself do the one thing everyone expected, take the boy from my arms and send me away. His son's wolf had named me. And a grieving king who has spent 2 years not trusting his own broken instincts was not about to overrule an instinct that had never failed. They gave me a room. Bram would not sleep without me. He sickened when they tried, went pale and would not eat. His little wolf keening through the walls, and so I stayed, the most bewildered guest in the north. A bread seller installed in a fortress because a prince had decided I was his mother, and no one, least of all his father, could talk the child's wolf out of it. The pack had not recovered. That is not an exaggeration. A pup's wolf is never wrong. It is the first thing a wolf child is taught to trust in themselves, and the last thing anyone questions, and the king's own heir had looked at a nameless Omega and named her Mama in the public market, and the whole territory was quietly losing its mind trying to decide what it meant. That the Luna had come back somehow. that I was secretly her blood, that I had bewitched the boy. Every theory but the true one, because the true one had not occurred to a single one of them, myself included. If you want to know what a pup's wolf actually knew that morning, and whether they let a market woman keep standing between that child and the people who came for him, because they did come, then stay with me, follow this one to the end. The whole pack had already decided how this story went. They were wrong about the most important part, and so was I. Lady Sigrun arrived on the third day, and she did not come to threaten me. Clever women rarely do. She was the dead Luna's mother, Astrid's mother, the pup's grandmother by blood, a matriarch of one of the great houses. And she swept into my borrowed room in morning grey she had clearly never taken off and looked at me the way you look at a stain on a thing you loved. "You poor creature," she said, and it was almost kind. "You have no idea what you have walked into. Let me spare you." My daughter was the Luna of these territories, the great love of the king's life, taken from him in childbed, and this pack has grieved her for 2 years. Her voice did not shake, she had practiced it past shaking. My grandson is grasping at a ghost. He sees a soft omega with flower on her hands, and his wolf, poor lamb, reaches for the mother he never knew. It is heartbreaking. It is also a sickness, and you are prolonging it. Every day you stay, you teach that child to fasten his grief onto a stranger who will be gone by winter. She smiled, and the smile was frost. Be kind to him, let him mourn his mother properly. Go, before you break him worse than death already has. She left me with that, and it did exactly what she meant it to. It sat in my chest like a stone, because it was clever, and it was half true, and it was the very fear I had been carrying myself. A ghost. A soft thing for a motherless pup to grasp at. Of course. What else could I possibly be to this child? I resolved, that night, to find a way to gently unwind Bram's small fingers from mine and give him back to his own grief, because I would rather break my own heart than teach a child to break his on me. But my hands had noticed something my fear kept talking me out of, and I have learned, over a hard life, to trust my hands. Because it was not only the pup, it was the king. Magnus could not be in a room with me. Not the way a man avoids a stranger, the way a man avoids a fire he is afraid he will walk into. He came to see his son each evening, and each evening his wolf, that vast grey shadow of him, would drift across the room to where I sat and lie down at my feet with a low sound like something setting down a weight, and Magnus would go rigid and call it back and it would not come, and he would leave earlier than he meant to every single time. A grieving man does not flee a bread seller. A man whose own wolf has recognised something his mind refuses to name, that man flees. I filed it away with everything else I was not yet meant to understand, and there was the portrait. The great hall held a painting of the dead Luna, Astrid, golden and lovely, in the place of honour above the high table, where the whole court could not help but see her. Everyone in that fortress looked at it. They bowed to it, some of them. Servants left flowers beneath it. Only one person in the entire pack never looked at it at all, the king. I watched him take his meals with his eyes fixed on his plate, on the fire, on his son, on anything in that hall but the face of the wife he was said to have loved beyond all reason. I had known grief. Grief looks at the beloved face and cannot stop. What Magnus did was the opposite. He could not begin. And those are not the same thing, whatever the whole kingdom had decided to call it. The truth came out on the 9th night, in the hall, after Bram was asleep. I had gone down for bread. Old habit, I could not sleep in a place where I did not make the bread, and found the king alone at the high table with a cup he was not drinking, under the portrait he would not look at. He did not send me away. That was new. I sat, uninvited, which scandalized the one guard at the door, and I asked him the question no one else in that fortress had dared. "You never look at her," I said. "Everyone else in this hall looks at her but you." "Why?" The king was silent for a long time, The fire ticked. When he answered, his voice had lost the worn, smooth armor entirely. Because she deserved to be looked at by a man who loved her, he said, and I was never able to be him. He turned his cup without drinking. You have been told a story. The whole kingdom has. The great love. The Luna taken too soon. The king who mourns her still. It is a kinder story than the one that is true. His jaw worked. Astrid was an alliance. Her father's pack for my northern border. We were promised as children. She was clever and she was kind, and she knew, from the first, that I did not feel for her what a mate feels, that the bond had never woken between us, that it never would, because it was not hers to wake. And she married me anyway, and she ran my household better than I ran my kingdom, and she gave me a son, and she died doing it. He finally looked up, and his eyes were terrible. I did not lose the love of my life. I lost a good woman I could never love the way she was owed. And I have spent 2 years unable to look at her face, because it is not grief I feel when I do. It is shame. 3 sentences passed any cap I have ever heard of, and I let him have every one of them, because a man does not get to say a thing like that in 3 sentences, and I am not made of rules. And in the space after he said it, the whole shape of everything turned over in my mind at once. And I understood. Magnus, I said slowly, if the bond never woke for her, if it was never hers to wake, I could not finish it. I did not have to. His wolf lifted its great head from my feet and looked at its master. And the king looked at me, and the thing that had been drifting across every room between us for 9 days finally had a name, and it was not a ghost, and it was not grief, and it was not a motherless pup grasping at a soft stranger. A pup's wolf is never wrong. But a pup's wolf does not name the past, it names what is coming. Bram had not looked at me in that market and seen the mother he lost. His small, uncorrupted wolf had looked at me and seen the mother he was going to have, had recognised, with a child's brutal clarity, the mate his father's bond had been saving, unspent, for a woman who sold bread in the lower town. The child had known before any of us. The child had always known. He had simply been waiting, with a pup's endless patience, for the 2 slow adults to catch up. That was the moment the fear went out of me, and something with a spine took its place. Because Lady Sigrun had told me to leave so the child could mourn. And the child was not mourning. The child was right. And I was done, entirely, permanently done, being talked out of a thing my own hands had known for 9 days by people who found the truth less convenient than the story. I'm not a ghost, I said, and my voice had changed, and I heard it change, and I'm not going quietly by winter. Your son didn't make a mistake in that market, and neither did your wolf, and neither, I think, did mine. I stood. You've spent 2 years believing you don't deserve the bond because of what you couldn't give Astrid. But you didn't withhold it from her, Magnus. You never had it to give. It wasn't hers. It was always going to be someone else's. I made myself say the rest. It appears to be mine. And I am not going to let your guilt, or that woman's grief, cheat your son out of the mother his own wolf went out into a market and found. Lady Sigrun made her move the next morning, and she made it before the full council, which was her mistake, because a woman that clever should have known better than to build her trap in a room full of witnesses. She petitioned to take the child. She did it beautifully. The king was unwell with grief, she said. All the court could see it. He had let a nameless Omega into the royal nursery, a woman who had bewitched the prince's wolf, a stranger with no blood and no pack fastening herself to the air like a tick. For the good of the child, for the good of the bloodline, the boy should be given into the care of his mother's kin, to be raised properly among his own until such time as the king recovered himself. She had votes. I could see it in the chamber, old lords who had loved Astrid, who found a grieving grandmother and a suspicious market witch a far easier story than the one where the king's dead marriage had been a duty. It was nearly done. It was so nearly done, and that is the moment I began this story with. the council on its feet, the king silent, and a small hand gripping mine so hard the knuckles went white. Because they had brought Bram in to make it clean, to hand him gently to his grandmother in front of the council so the transfer would look like mercy. And Bram had crossed the whole chamber, past his grandmother's open arms, past the lords, and put his hand in mine, and turned to face the room that wanted to take him, and set his small jaw in an expression I recognised, because I had worn it my whole life. It was the face of someone with nothing, who has decided, anyway, not to let go. I did not let go either. "He is 3 years old," I said into the chamber, and I did not raise my voice, because a thing said quietly in a loud room is the only thing anyone remembers. And every one of you has staked your vote on the idea that a pup's wolf is never wrong. You teach it to your own children. You have believed it your whole lives. It is the first law of this pack. I looked at Lady Sigrun. "So which is it, my lady? Is a pup's wolf never wrong, or is it never wrong until it names a bread seller, and then, suddenly, for the first time in the history of your people, it is a sickness to be cured by taking the child away from the one person he chose?" The chamber had gone very still. You cannot have both. Either your grandson is broken, and everything you have ever taught about wolves is a lie, or he is right, and you are trying to take a child away from his mother in front of a council that knows better. The room's certainty turned, all at once the way weather turns. And Lady Sigrun, who could not afford to be cornered, stopped being clever. "He is bewitched," she said too loud, "and I will not lose my daughter's son to her," and she reached out and seized Bram's arm to pull him bodily from my hand. And the boy cried out, and his small wolf flared in terror, and in the chaos of it a brazier went over, knocked by a lord surging to his feet, and a sheet of flame ran up the old dry tapestry beside the child, and for one heartbeat the whole thing hung in the balance. A screaming pup, a spreading fire, a room of people too shocked to move. I moved. I have no wolf worth the name, and no strength worth boasting, but I had 2 hands and a child, and the 2 occupy the whole of a person if you let them. I put myself between Bram and the fire, and I swept him up, and I took the burning edge of that tapestry across my forearm, getting him clear of it. I felt it. The real and immediate cost of it. The skin of my arm searing as I turned my body into a wall between a 3-year-old and the flames. The pain was enormous. I did not let go of him. A person can hold on to a great deal, it turns out, if the alternative is letting a child burn. And then Magnus was there. The king crossed that chamber faster than I have ever seen anything move, and he tore the burning tapestry down with his bare hands, and he put the fire out, and he turned, and he saw his son safe in the arms of a bread seller whose forearm was blistering red, and something in the strongest wolf alive finally broke all the way open. He went to his knees in front of the whole council, not in fury, down on the stone, and took my burned arm in his 2 enormous hands as gently as if it were made of glass. And he did not look at Lady Sigrun, and he did not look at his lords, and he looked only at me and at his son. "Enough," he said, and his voice filled the chamber to the rafters. "I have let this pack tell a kind lie for 2 years, because it was easier than the truth, and my son nearly burned for it in front of me." He rose, still holding my arm. "Hear the truth then, all of you, and let the grieving be honest at last. I loved Astrid as a friend and a partner and the mother of my child, and never once as a mate, because the bond was never hers. She knew it, she forgave it, and she deserved a better man than the one who could not give her what was not his to give." His eyes went, for the first time in 2 years, up to the golden portrait above the high table, and held there, and I watched a man begin, at long last, to actually grieve. I dishonoured her memory more by pretending than I ever could by telling the truth. And the truth is that my son's wolf did what my own was too broken to do. It went out into a market, and it found the woman the bond was always waiting for. He looked at me. "You have been kind to my child for 11 days without asking anything, and you put your own body between him and fire without a heartbeat's pause. My wolf knew you on the third night. My son knew you in the first hour. I am the last one to the truth, as I have been the last one to everything since the day I was crowned. His thumb moved over my unburned wrist. Stay, not as his nurse, not as my guest. Stay as what my son already named you. I stood in the wreckage of the council chamber with a prince on my hip and a burned arm and the king of the Iron Territories kneeling to a bread seller, and I did the only thing I have ever known how to do, which is tell the truth. I told you the first day that I was no one, I said, and the whole chamber leaned in to hear the Omega answer the king. I've decided to stop apologizing for it. I don't have a pack, or a name that opens doors, or a drop of noble blood. All I have is 2 hands and a stubborn habit of not letting go of things that need holding. Bram's fingers tightened in mine, and I let Magnus see me smile. Your son grabbed one of those hands in a market and called it home. I'm not going to make a liar of a 3-year-old. That's not a Luna's decision. It's just mine, and it's already made. He kissed me then. 1 breath. No more. A kiss that said a whole sentence and did not need to become a scene. And what broke open in me was not the thing the songs promise. It was recognition, plain and total, the vertigo of being seen all the way down by a man who had spent 2 years believing he had no right to see anyone, and who chose, in front of the pack that wanted me gone, to want exactly what his son had found. Bram, wedged between us, patted us both on the face with enormous satisfaction, as though he had personally arranged the entire thing, which, I have since concluded, he had. Lady Sigrun was escorted from the chamber, and, in time, from the territory, she keeps to her own house now, and Bram visits twice a year. Because a boy should know his mother's blood even when his mother's blood behaved badly, and because I would not let old grief become one more thing taken from him. The king's wolf never once objected to my saying so, which I have learned to take as the final word on any matter in this house. They named me Luna, under the next full moon, which still strikes me as a thing that happened to someone else and got recorded under my name. My arm healed to a long pale scar I will carry for good, the cost of the thing, written where I can see it, and I have never once been sorry for it. Magnus touches it sometimes without knowing he does, the way you touch a thing that frightened you. I never mention it. Some things you give a person by not watching them. 6 months on, the golden portrait still hangs above the high table, and the king looks at it now, every day, on purpose, with a clear and honest sorrow that has nothing left to hide in it. We tell Bram about Astrid, the clever, kind woman who ran a kingdom and loved him for the 9 months she carried him. And we do not pretend she was something she was not, and the boy has 2 mothers now, one in the ground and one at the table, and does not seem to find this strange in the least. Children rarely do. They know things about love the rest of us take 2 years and a fire to work out. A letter came last week from the guild that would not let a packless Omega bake for its market stalls, without a sponsor I could never afford. They had heard, they wrote, that a bread seller from the lower town had married the Alpha King, and surely this was an error, and would I confirm it for their records? I had Edric write the reply. Since my hand for letters is poor from a life spent needing instead of writing. I did not gloat. Gloating and grace wear the same coat, in my experience, and it is hard to tell them apart from a distance, easier up close, where you can see which one is smiling. I confirmed the rumour. I added that I would be pleased to bake for their market again, any time they liked, and that they might reflect, in the meanwhile, on how many futures they had refused at the door because the future arrived with flour on its hands. Magnus found me dictating it at his own table, in the seat at his right hand, with Bram asleep against my side, and his small fist, even in sleep, wound through 2 of my fingers. "What are you telling them?" the king asked, reading over my shoulder. His wolf a warm weight across all 3 of our feet. "The truth," I said. That a pup looked up at a woman he had never met, grabbed her hand, and said 1 word, and the whole market went silent. I looked down at the sleeping child holding on to me even in his dreams. They all thought he'd made a mistake. He was the only one in the whole kingdom who hadn't. So before I let you go, tell me what you think, because I have turned it over for half a year and I still cannot settle it. Do you believe a pup's wolf truly knows the future, that Bram looked at a stranger and saw, with a certainty none of us could match, the mother he was meant to have? Or do you think it was only a grieving child reaching for the first warm hand that reached back? And it happened, by grace, to reach for the one woman his father's bond had been waiting on all along? Tell me your theory below. I have lived inside the answer for 6 months, and I still cannot decide. And if you want to stay with us, Bram Growing, the portrait honestly grieved at last. Whatever small hand reaches for mine next, comment the wolf and follow along, because I have made a life out of not letting go of the things that grab hold of me, and this fortress, it turns out, is full of them. Where are you listening from tonight? Pull up a chair. The bread is fresh, the fire is warm, and there is a small boy who will insist, the moment he wakes, on holding your hand too.